what we are going to ask ourselves today is what does it mean to put the human at the center in technology? Because we as Europeans, we embraced the principle that at our core identity is human beings, human rights, and human identity and governance. But how can you uphold this human-centric vision? And so this is what I'm going to ask to everyone here. So Serena, I'll start with you. Let's start from the basics. What is the relationship between human at the center and the EU laws and policies? And what's, in your opinion, at the core of compliance? And what should be our focus here?
Yes, well, human dignity and human rights are core values of the European Union. So it's not a surprise that when we read the European legislation like the GDPR or the AI Act, we will find these core values stated at the beginning. For example, in the GDPR, it is stated in one of the first recitals that the processing of personal data should be designed to serve mankind. That's actually what is written in the law. And more recently, the AI Act states that the purpose is to promote the uptake of human-centric and trustworthy AI. So the human at the center as an approach of the European legislation is in a way the response to the increasing awareness about the ethical implications of the use of digital technologies, which are consuming a large amount of data, for example, XR technologies, and which are impacting the daily life of many people, as we have seen in the recent year with the development of AI technologies. So far so good. We should I don't think anyone could disagree that these are the core values and we want to respect the law.
We will see later when we have the question time.
Okay, that was my opinion then. So why compliance is such a hurdle for a lot of companies and organizations? In my experience, I work as a professional in a large organization with compliance, trying to make people respect the rules. I think the spirit of the law and these values are lost in translation. So when you have when you need to translate these values into actionable activities, processing with actual people that have to follow the processes, this is where the disalignment actually happens. And there can be many causes, many root causes to this. I will address just one in the next couple of minutes. And it is that, in my opinion, when you have to make the rules concrete and make some priorities, you will end up giving this task to someone, and that someone, it must be someone with the expertise about the legislation, because you cannot demand that any stakeholders in your company is a EU legislation expert. So you have to make this translation. And it could be done by some internal compliance teams, but also some external consultants. And what I see in my experience is that many times when making the priorities, the documentation part takes over. So there is a lot of documentation to make, and we forget the ethical questions. We can witness some processes that are designed in a way that are too complicated. There is too papers to produce, and people get lost. They don't see the point. They think it's too complicated, and some might also get scared. Because, oh my God, I cannot do this project if I also have to do all these papers. Or I will avoid using this data set because then I don't have to fill out this paper. That's in my experience and in any case. Of course, we shouldn't be naive that there is a lot of external pressure to deliver faster than your competitors. So, to me, working in the academia, the ideal process to make sure that the core values and the ethical questions are implemented in the development process is, of course, using the research process, the classical one, where the research is conducted in an ethical way. But companies don't always have time to do that. So how can we come back to the core ethical questions?
Question for question.
Yes.
So maybe we have the paper at the center instead of the human at the center. So that's why I'm turning to Javier, because yes, we already see that there is this question, these questions that show a tension between regulation and innovation. And how can we address these concerns without losing momentum, without losing the ability to be competitive in this environment? And is there, in your opinion, a viable path that doesn't force a choice between these two extremes, let's say?
Yes, thank you, Mariachiara. Well, the short answer to these questions is yes, there is a path. That is my opinion. And that is the premise of our work in the academic chair for the responsible development of the metaverse, the institution where I develop my research with our colleagues. That's our starting point. Like, we are in contact with many different stakeholders, with the industry on the side of immersive technologies, with policymakers also in Europe. And of course, there are different views and conflict, not necessarily conflicting, but diverging interests sometimes. But the short answer would be yes. And now, since I'm an academic, I will rant or I will diverge for the next 3 or 4 minutes.
Yes, you have 5 minutes for that.
Yes, then I won't do that too much. No, this idea of regulation being on the way, in the middle of technological progress in Europe, in my opinion, it has a certain base. And of course, there are some facts there that point in that direction, but it's not fully right. I think it's based on some misconceptions and some ideas that are not correctly interpreted, either inside the European Union or also from outside, also mostly coming from the US, but also from other areas in the world. For industries, for technological industries to thrive, there are two priorities that need to be there. One is usability. Whatever service or product that is developed by these entities, companies, needs to be solving a problem, bringing a solution to the public. And that needs to be in balance with respect with fundamental rights and trust. It all comes down to trust. The people, the users, the citizens need to be in a trustworthy environment and feel that their identity, their data, their security is not going to be abused in those environments. I think in Europe we can conciliate those two things. There is this current trend of deregulation, right? We certainly in Europe don't have the big champions, the big names that mostly dominate the industry from the US. We rely a lot on those entities, companies, institutions for our digital services in general, in immersive technologies, but also in the rest of the environments. And the idea will be behind this deregulation movement is that let's eliminate rules, let's eliminate legislation to make our European industry thrive and to create these champions. Because the US did it that way, so if we imitate, it's going to work. And in my opinion, that's not the current, or that's not the real trend. One counterexample to this, California. The obvious center for innovation in the US, in the West, we could say, OECD countries and so on. It has the highest capital gains tax in the US, 8.9% of the capital gains, if I remember correctly, 2 points above the national average in the US. They were the first ones to enact privacy rules in America, in the United States. They are not the most industry-friendly area within the US. There are other areas, other jurisdictions, states that are more business friendly in that sense. And still, they thrived and they found a way through other initiatives. The main one for me, the most important, is financing. We don't have a full capital union, European Union capital union developed, and it's one of the main things getting on the way for this. Startups find a barrier in financing at some point. We have fantastic ideas. They start developing in Europe. At some point, when they want to scale up, they need to go to the US. It's been, if I remember correctly, 30% of European Union startups since 2008 that have moved across the pond to the US just because of financing. That's, to me, one of the priorities. Human capital, of course, the talent that needs to be around, that is present in those areas, also the Yangtze area in China, where is the biggest innovation hub also in that region. They have a huge capital when it comes to education, training, human capital there. Those ideas, I think, they are not my ideas. Other academics that are developing and are reflecting about these thoughts, but those are things that the European Union can do better, other than regulation, other than changing regulation. When it comes to changing regulation, of course, we should streamline, we should reduce, cut red tape, and so on. It's obvious that there are specific choices and specific movements that we need to do to improve all this. But the risk that I see, and we see in academia in general, not only at the academic chair, but from the academic environment where I move, is that we risk going in the path of deregulation to get industry growth. We risk ending up without industry growth and without protections for fundamental rights if we go too deep on that path. So in my opinion, there are things that are good in that development, like the digital omnibus proposed by the European Commission, introduce one specific example that will be my last in this intervention, which I think is it's an example of what a good way of cutting red tape. One single point of contact for public administration. If you are a company, you suffer a cyber attack, data breach. Nowadays, currently, in the European Union, the next step is that you need to be contacted a lot of people with a lot of many different information to share. And many times, companies don't even know what are the secure steps after that. The European Commission has proposed in the new digital omnibus proposal to change that and to make a single point of contact. Okay, you suffered the cyber attack, the data breach outside, you go to us, there is this single box from the public administration, we take care of the rest. We inform the stakeholders, we help you with all the resources from the public administration, local, national, European, to handle the process after that. So I think those are good examples of what the European Union could be doing in the future to develop this.
Thank you. So yes, the question is how to create a regulation that is actually an actionable and able to be complied to regulation. Because like this, it's not like human-centric, because the humans at the center of the regulation are like a bit confused of what I see. So now, Daniele, you can give us a perspective also somehow from outside EU, since you're Swiss-based. Yeah. And the question is, how can Europe walk this path at this time?
Well, I think what's important is like to find or maybe defining Europe as a possible third way, not just try and follow the path of China or the US. It's too late for that. We cannot like start 2025 and go gather talents, right? So maybe the idea, Luciano Floridi proposed it, for instance, in the latest days, to establish a third way between China and the US and see that some regulations can maybe be a strength of Europe a way of developing and creating technology which is long-lasting, which is trustworthy, and which is ethically acceptable. And in this sense, if we're looking at actionable frameworks, we might be willing to look at the open source world, which is very fascinating, is very talked about a lot, and there has been experiments and some models have been developed, some open source models, but at the same time, also Javier mentioned the usability. I think we're all aware of the fact that many open source products are not yet ready to serve the purpose of, I see heads nodding, so like if we put the human in the middle, we also have to put the human users in the middle, right? So that was something I've had in a couple of conversations recently. So like, we want to go this path, we want to go full digital sovereignty because we see a lot of pressure coming from all over, from every side, but at the same time we have to work towards giving the same standard of usability. And how can we achieve that? We need to make sure we work on those aspects, like from the user perspective, like maybe make it more user-centric, and also establishing some real standards in terms of open source development, like away from open washing. So what is an open source model? Is it just open weights, or do we also have information about how the data is trained, which data is trained, etc.? And this, I mean, in the end, what's important, and we can try, and there are already some initiatives like this, I always forgot the name, this high performance computing joint undertaking. Like, this could be, we should lead by example, not just by moral standard or bringing some constriction, but maybe showing that it can be also a way for a positive, to foster a positive collaboration between academia, private sector, and institutions. That's where I think the path should work. And also maybe, since we're in Europe, like what I would like to underline is also the democratization, also through language, because Europe has many languages, and we should foster an approach where also like low resource languages are valuated.
Thank you. So we see that there are many humans. When we speak about human at the center, we have many types of humans. We have users, we have regulators, we have followers of what is going on, and also we have humans that are doing business. You mentioned the open washing. We can also mention ethical washing at this point, because sure. We are speaking a lot in these years about the relationship between ethics, policy, and public, so the citizens. So also in this track, if you were here before, you heard speaking about that too. So Marine, so how is it possible to integrate, in your opinion, ethics and policy, and how this is a way to differentiate companies and regions, and how can we build trust through this relationship between ethics, policy, and actionable ideas, and what's the value of ethics in this?
So I'm going to be the contrarian view, the slightly cynical pro-business voice here, because there needs to be one. So the first thing is, yes, there is some ethics washing. You can see in large AI companies, now OpenAI has a red team. So already, why do you call it red? Because it's not good news, right? When things get red. You have on the other side of the echiquier, you have Anthropic. Anthropic is basing its brand value over safety. We're going to do safe AI. That's what we do. So you're like, okay, so basically some choose where is the compass for them in terms of ethics. Do they all believe in it? Maybe, hopefully for us and for all the users, but we don't really know. If I want to be even slightly more contrarian and controversial, I'd say that a company that I used to work for, Palantir, which is a pretty controversial company, actually, from the inception of it, has had a privacy and civil liberties team, which is now probably a 50-people team, which has always decided when the company would engage, give its software to use, and not. So ethics, believe it or not, were always very, very deeply ingrained into how Palantir has done business. And that was a feature. That was not just on top of it. It was from the onset, this is how we are going to do business because we know the power of the technology we are developing. We know it can be used for, you know, more or less debatable, let's say, issues, and we don't want to that it goes in the wrong hands or for the wrong users. The second point I'd make is, comes back basically to, you know, more the regulation, how we define ourselves. Of course, we are all Europeans. We all like Europe. We all think, at the end of the day, that we have a slight, maybe, moral edge in terms of the values that keep us together. And it feels great, I have to say. So, yes, we have this. Do we over red tape? Do we overplay it? Probably. Does it undermine innovation? Yes, it does. Not only for financing reasons. Yes, at some point in time, startups need to go somewhere else simply because there is no way beyond, you know, Series C, D, that companies can find as much capital as they need to develop. But beyond that, there is, we also have, you know, the defaults of our qualities. So culturally, Europeans are more doubtful. They have less, you know, the grit of, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. And yes, they get lost into then paperwork and compliance. Oh my God, why is it so complicated? And we shouldn't have that. So simplification, yes, should happen. There are also a lot of, you know, communication gigs around EU Inc. And now we are going to have a 28th regime. I don't know if we need to go there. Because ultimately, I don't think we should lose our soul. This is also a matter of geopolitics, as you framed it. And yes, if we have a distinctive hedge, that's probably where it is. So we can do things in the third way, only we haven't really cracked the recipe of the third way. We've cracked the slightly overcomplicated layers, slightly more bureaucratic, slightly slower, and that doesn't work. So we need to keep our edge, stay in the middle, fight for what we think is important to us and for humanity and society, but find the tricks that help us accelerate. And my third point would be, the good news is that when it comes to stakeholders, we might have actually a good edge with the way we look at ethics. So starting with, you know, simply how we hire talents. Some people, I accompany a few founders in AI. There is so much money thrown literally at the face of AI researchers right now, and still you have researchers who will stay in Europe. You have people who will say, it's okay, I've done big tech, I'm not interested into making another pile of millions. I actually want to do things here in the way that I like. So yes, ethics and the way we look at it can be, you know, an edge with certain populations, talents, or Gen Zs. You know, things don't either. He wants to cut me, he wants to cut me.
No, it's not just quantity, right? That's the interesting thing.
Right? No, exactly.
It's not just the quantity of money. Maybe we bring some quality with this approach.
No, exactly. So it's Gen Zers, some special talents will see that as an edge and as a good reason to stay in Europe, and we desperately need them. And the very, very last point will be, and yes, you know, ethics can be actually really good for business, and I'll double click on the open source point. So the other day I had a question from a reporter who was asking, but what about there are actually backdoors in open source models? Well, you know what, at the end of the day, sovereignty being what it is, and it means a bit, if I ask you, we all will have a very different definition of sovereignty. But what is important is to be competitive. So if you use open source models, even Chinese open source models, Qwen is a fantastic model, you are very likely to cut the margins that, you know, some big tech providers like OpenAI are having and imposing on business. So we need to be smart and agile in that respect. We need to look at our ethics, and our ethics are what? We also want to be faster to market, develop specialized, trustworthy, strong models and or worlds, and make it happen so that it benefits the greater number. And we don't want to be left behind.
Thank you. So what we see is that we have a balance between many actors in this topic. And also, since I am a philosopher at heart, I would say that every issue that we are talking about in this moment is inherently political in the traditional sense of politics, meaning that we have to do with the citizens, so we have to work on the places, the common places we are all living in, and this is Europe in this moment, but we can think about the technology as a political actor. We see, if we speak about the companies that have an internal ethical team that decides who can use this technology, that's already a political choice somehow. Yeah. Not political in the sense of right and left, let's say, but political in the profound sense of this word. So what I want to do is to go on with this conversation, since we have half an hour more, but I want to involve the public in the conversation, so I'm stepping down and coming here, if I don't kill myself. So I don't know if there is already someone who wants to contribute to the conversation, or we can go on. Do you really want them to go on and speak?
Another hand also.
Yeah, you spoke about the backdoor in the open source, because open source has a backdoor, maybe not, but it's, you know, because it's open source, it's easy to crack and also protect from. But also, I would say the UX of open source might be an issue as well.
Everybody has backdoors.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Good one, right? That makes absolute sense, right? And I mean, using Microsoft sometimes when I have to incorporate environments, I'll be honest, it's as bad as open source software that I've used before. So I don't think that would be, if it's for corporate software, I would say, no big deal. Sorry, my opinion.
Oh, that was like also what I tried to approach when I said about standards in open source, right? So because of course the nature of open source is like more transparent or more open to every kind of attack and manipulation, but establishing some kind of standard might help also mitigate this kind of issue, right? So.
No, but there are always backdoors.
Yes.
Seriously, in,
yes,
in
yes,
software, that's the nature of
then,
it.
yeah, and then the question is like,
which
who
one
do
is
you wanna,
acceptable?
Exactly. Which kind
one
of
is
backdoor
acceptable
do
to
you wanna accept?
Exactly.
And which not? Great. Yeah, totally.
That's the only point in terms of, again, sovereignty. It's assessing your risk and wondering, okay, is that acceptable to me?
What's the
or
risk
not?
I wanna take?
Otherwise, you
and
can
which not? Yeah.
try to redevelop everything yourself, but it's a bit costly.
No, but awesome. Yeah. There was someone
In the back.
Yeah.
Coming.
In our work on this discussion with our members, which are generally universities in the Netherlands, we have a lot of discussions about what are the values that we find important in order to make decisions like what you're discussing here today for
Sorry, a bit
policy.
closer.
Hello. But there's a lot of values to talk about, and there's a lot of decisions to be made. So I have two questions for you. One is, how do you come to a decision about what values to prioritize in your own work? And second, do you think that it's difficult for Europe to come to an agreed value set, or do we need to use all of the values all of the time for everything in Europe?
Thank you.
I think I can chip in for that one. When it comes to fundamental values in the development of technology in general, say AI, immersive technologies, social media, and so on. In my opinion, these ideas are more global than we think. Of course, the Italians are a bit different to the Spanish, and we eat the lunch a bit later than the Germans, and all these small things and so on. But there are a number of core developments or core ideas that we share globally. Ideas about freedom of information, freedom of speech, privacy, self-determination in digital environments, deciding yourself over what you want to do and what is happening to your identity inside the digital environments. That's not a Spanish development, that's not an European development, that's universal. And I refuse to accept that the Europeans are the only people concerned about these things. In the US, I think currently there are 28 states out of 52 that have enacted data protection privacy rules, for instance. That's more than half the country. They don't have the comprehensive federal law general, but that is saying something. A lot of people looking into that. Australia is already debating on developments on restricting access to social media for minors. That are debates that will be, if that will be on the table, which is in a way in Europe, but if the debate was going in that direction, we will be getting tons of backlash from a lot of people, like saying these Europeans, they're turning crazy, they're going to kill their own industries and whatnot. Even in countries that are not full democracies or are autocracies, people crave for these things, for these developments. So in our own development and in my own work, since I come from a privacy and data protection background, I think those are important, and we tend to focus a lot of on that in our research at the university. But there are many other aspects, like competition, for instance, that is going through the drain in many different areas where with this race to get the first on top, no? To be the company that monopolizes AI models or LLMs in a particular place, to have the marketplace for apps, the one and only. So there are other values there also, not only those, but those I think are important to prioritize.
Okay, but questions for the whole panel.
Yeah, I think like what I found very interesting is what Marine said. Like we start like as European, we have our value, our frames, but the most interesting thing is like really what's happening in other countries, which you mentioned. I wouldn't go to the autocracies that much, but more like in a generation point of view, like. You know, you see also like on TikTok and stuff, so younger generation praising how cool welfare in Europe is, right? But it also comes with regulation. So it's like, that's what I think like with this leading by example. So if we can establish some successful ideas, then people will see, okay, these values can also work in terms of business, so you don't get left behind. But yeah, it's hard to answer like which values, right? But I think we could come up with like a couple, like 3 or 4.
Yeah, there could be a very ancient philosophy concept that can work here. That is St. Augustine idea of the Ordo Amoris, the order of the heart. That doesn't mean we need to prioritize. It doesn't mean we have all the same order of priorities, but we have like a core set of values, and then they can be in some kind of dynamics. And that's also interesting because we mentioned sovereignty before, and another way to look at sovereignty is not just like owning or controlling, but it's like being the sovereign, so the leader, which is sovereignty as a way to lead by example. So, and the example doesn't set exactly the order of values we are thinking of, but it sets the way we are going to act upon the values, but I want to hear
maybe
you.
also what I was thinking, like once we identify somehow a core, then these core values will not be like will agree among themselves. So I don't see that much a question of what's value number 1 and number 2. It's more defining a set which is cohesive and coherent. But I told too much.
Yes, if the question is about in the daily job, in the work, in a more practical, I don't know if that was your intention, because this, yeah, because this now we are flying very high. But so I work in a university in the IT department actually. So. When you are actually working with rules, I think the values that you are prioritizing are naturally those that will make you compliant with the GDPR, for example. But then you will, I think there is a tendency to maybe forget the values when you have to choose a tool. For example, when you are choosing tools, you are looking at what is convenient, what is more usable, what it costs less. And there we are actually, I'm not speaking on behalf of my organization, but in general, I think we are more keen on taking the values to the side and say, okay, I will just take this. And even I'm a person who is very interested in privacy, and I really value my privacy, but still I'm using an Android phone and so on. So I think we get compromises every day about these things, and we don't really follow these values in all the choices that we make in the daily activities. Yes, exactly. Or we choose not to think about it because it's more convenient.
Exactly, because there is a matter of friction here. Because if we want our experience of technology to be frictionless, then we need to forget some of the friction, actually. But I want to hear also the position of Maria.
So I think you're right in that we should have our own, a small set of values. I think what is very important is that people are very aware of what they do and the arbitrage, because the compromise will always be there. So we just need to have the compromises that, again, reflect our own right to self-determine. And I'm sure we don't all use DuckDuckGo when we go and scroll on the web. So yes, we give and we give and we give data and we give indications and we don't know where that goes. But it's fine to a certain extent for as long as we are properly informed about that. So yes, again, I think the Europe and we both live in Switzerland, Daniele and myself, so we know very well what it means to live in communities that do choose for themselves and based on consensus. And consensus is very hard. It's even harder when you're 27 member states. That's 100%. But yes, a small set of rules and of values who we stick to, and which ultimately boil down, I think, to not doing harm and living as a society and in a peaceful fashion, is ideally what we should strive for. Other countries and jurisdictions have very different interpretations of that. In some parts of the world, you basically refer to a state that will choose for you what is good for you. You will not self-determine. And in other more free-ranging jurisdictions, currently, the US has ranked, I think, number 57 in freedom of the press. So it goes well. So it's, again, this middle point that we need to keep and continue to have, but we need to make it functional. We need to make sure that we don't get left behind, which is an enormous risk for Europe. We are not playing as much as we used to, even by the sheer size of our market. So how do we continue to stay competitive and have a word, a seat at the table? We can see it daily in the news in terms of how do we continue to exist in important discussions. There is peace negotiations in Ukraine. I mean, we're barely invited, right? So, I mean, we need to face the fact that to continue to have a seat at the table, we need to figure out, and if I can be rude for a second, we need to pull our shit together once for all and continue to be competitive if we want to continue to play.
Thank you.
Yeah, because voices against that are becoming, like in the past few days, very, very strong, right?
Exactly.
Dismantle the EU and stuff, so.
I'm not sure if I saw someone like, no. Okay, so yes, we still have time to continue the discussion. So I believe if no one has anything to say, we can go on with exploring this part. So I got some very interesting keywords. So we have open source that is still not explored enough. We have sovereignty. We have the way to be competitive, and the question, and the down-to-earth approach, because we are all individual and we want to have to do with rules in a healthy way, let's say.
Okay, so back to the open source, let's say, software in Europe. Why open source? I mean, isn't there enough? Is it there software in Europe that can replace, you know, the software that is American right now, or is there none?
Do we?
That's the question, really.
Do we have
like that,
any...
that everybody will pay for the same way they pay for or not pay for?
No, do we have any European developed models that are as performant as currently, you know, the large language models developed across the pond?
Well, Mistral is not bad, and it's French. But I think the point is also maybe one of the reasons, like, it has a shift in perspective compared to commercial models. So it's like, it could be, or at least hypothetically or theoretically, it's a difference in the approach. So as long as you have a private-owned company, you're going to end up following stakeholder interest, right? So that's why I think the whole point about the third way. Because in the end, it could be that, you know, from stakeholder perspective, it might be better to, you know, get some points away and just wait, and then let's develop things, although they're not very safe and stuff like that. So not necessarily. But the idea would be to change the framework, like change of mind with more an open source approach. I think that's kind of the idea.
Maybe to give an example on that also, the adoption of open source, first of all, open source where and for what and in which industries and in which conditions and so on, right? But if that's not necessarily a way only if you have already industries or developments that are already in the market. And I will give an example on this. One of the biggest competition cases in the European Union and globally, that is cited globally actually, was the limitation for Microsoft. This will sound like ancient history for some people, probably because it was in the early 2000s, on the Windows Media Player. They were forced to open the player, basically the way that media was played in Windows, to allow interoperability, to allow competitors in the market. Open source thrived out of that legal imposition. There was a whole software industry in Europe, limited in some ways, but it was developing, right? That boosted cooperation between those companies also. And Spotify was born connected, not directly from there, but connected to those accesses and impositions. Now we have an European champion, one of the few European champions, let's say, in the tech market, thanks to that debate. Not necessarily imposed by that, but connected to that debate. Just to give an example that was somehow connected with these ideas. But in any case, I think what is most important is this third way of doing things that we are talking about, right? And in that, I agree very much with what Daniele said before. We need to define it, and we need to adhere to it in the coming years. There are two concepts that are out there that I find very interesting when it comes to this debate. One is the concept of luxury rules. Many people think that this putting the human in the center, or this care for fundamental rights and so on, we can only afford that if we have the rest of the needs covered, in the sense of we have big companies, we are strong economically, we are a geopolitical power in the world, then we can, or over those conditions, we can put the human in the center, right? I don't agree with that approach, but I do agree in a way with what Marin was saying also, that we need to recover momentum. We cannot, if things continue ceteris paribus as they are right now, we are losing initiative, and that's coming at the expense of European industry and our way of life, of course. But that needs to be done in a smart way. And in that, I adhere very much with a theory that was enunciated by a professor, Luis Garicano, from, he's in America. He's in London School of Economics right now, who said that Europe needs to find the way to be the smart second mover. Avoid this debate of we need an European Google, an European OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever. Focus on specific niche technologies where we are well placed. And in that, I think the industrial metaverse, the immersive technologies connected to industry, to manufacturing, we have a good stance. Many other, some other areas. In that, if Europe becomes the smart second mover, we can thrive in the future.
I'll have just a stab at Mistral for a second, and it's not because it's a French company. So Mistral, I mean, it's great to have a Mistral in Europe, but who here is using Le Chat?
Yeah.
Huh? Okay, well, instead of ChatGPT. I mean, it has, it's not as good. I'm very sorry, it's not as good. And Mistral is trying to do everything, from the large models to the consumer app, to now the compute power. So because it is the sovereign champion, and we needed one, as a flag to rally around. Unfortunately for them, they have, as a PR person, President Macron. So that has helped a lot, and maybe we all need to have a European champion like Mistral. But let's not allure ourselves in thinking that it's as good as, because depending on what you mean is good, no, it's not quite. So that's where I say we shouldn't be sovereign by all means, by all cost, right?
So we have another question from the stage.
Sorry.
Yes, the question is, it's
so
building up upon what Javier said about the second mover. If we have to go back at the topic of the discussion here, the human at the center, the human at the center could also be, or maybe I ask you, can be the purpose or the domain where you are applying the technology, that it's taking a more human-centric approach, in the sense that we are developing something that is more useful for the individuals and society in general, without always focusing on this commercial application that are used for the most trivial purposes, and we are wasting a lot of resources, natural resources, on things that could be done with a different technology, for example. So can we take the human-centric approach back into looking into what kind of application we are developing in Europe? Question.
Well, that's for sure. And also, I think that we're still back to the question about the values. Like, which kind of humans are we developing stuff for? And that would be like a huge topic for biases in technology, right? And like if we talk about China, like AI models are trained with a lot of ideological data. So that would be also a first question. When we build, how do we build? And how can we build something which is maybe as good as OpenAI? Does it have to be? I don't know. But yeah, not just for the propaganda of one other human being who likes to be in the center.
So we have another question from the public.
Yeah. Well, not so much a question, but I think you've made some really good points, all of you. And I think on that topic of like maybe a third way or a different way, that is European strength in the AI race, because we don't currently have a model in that race to be first. We can observe, we can learn from the mistakes, we can make better choices and curate the sources that we train those models on and end up with the most accurate, the most trustworthy model. And it doesn't have to be first, it can be better in a different way. And I think there have been some huge mistakes made in how OpenAI has been trained and all the big models, and it's impossible to pull back and start again at this stage. Whereas we can start over and do it right.
Thank you.
But in our very European cultural biases, yes, this could absolutely work. But will Europeans choose the not quite as good as, but compliant and ethical, or will they go for the best?
Bio quality.
Well, I mean, at least I can tell you what the answer is in France. They will go for the best. And they will not go, so it would work in Switzerland, for example. The Swiss would choose, yes, maybe it's not the best, but, and they have an open model, Apertus, which has been done, voilà. So, but they would make the conscious choice. I don't know that the whole of Europe would make that choice.
Yeah, but the thing is also maybe like how can we make sure that someone told like tools are coming into our everyday life, and like to decide for one tool instead of another is also a political choice. So I think at some point maybe stressing out the fact, okay, that's connected to this and this and that. I don't know. Yeah, someone will still choose for the most comfortable, but maybe the more you know, the more you can think of.
Well, another interesting thing is that should we put all our sovereignty on the technology or on the users of technology or on the designers of technology? What are we choosing to use and not just the tool itself? So I think there is a question about that here.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the fact about the importance of the model and it necessarily having to be the best one. Because if you enforce interoperability, then you can easily swap one model for another. And you do choose the application you use individually, but you don't choose what is built into the operating system of your phone or your business application and everything else that we use. So if you enforce a level playing field, then the model can be interchangeable. Also for developers, European developers should work with interoperable, exchangeable models. Using open standards, and then it doesn't matter really what model you use because they only have to be good enough. There's like a rising tide where a lot of models are good enough for RAG, what's it called? Retrieval Augmented Generation. Yeah, where if you define the parameters of the context, it doesn't matter how good the model is because it doesn't have to do everything you throw at it because it's very focused. So I mean that's like the infrastructure, the configuration of the entire ecosystem that's important. That you use policy to improve the parameters and the environment and the quality of the ecosystem, and that's something that Europe can do. But I do wonder if that would lead to innovation in the form of European players that are accustomed to dealing with the European regulations. And I'm not sure if that's the case. If, for example, we have a more robust ecosystem because European agencies or European startups know how to navigate policy and know how to navigate the GDPR, etc. And that is the one question I had, because I don't see that happening, but it should, shouldn't it?
You want to go? So I fully concur on the fact that the right route, the smartest route might be to not try to develop precisely, you know, a large language model that can compete or whatever, base ourselves upon open source models, and then choose our specialized models where, you know, that can be uniquely strong at what they do for a given industry, for a given type of audience, and where we can have some edge. I think that's the right battle to have. And on your end point, it's really a matter of threading through the arbitrage between, yes, there we want to be excellent at, and this we can let go. It's, you know, there is no real point to bother about trying to tick each and every of the boxes. The startups in Europe, except if you are in high-risk AI, if we take the AI Act, I don't think they worry too much about that. I think they develop their thing. You know, they want to run, get their thing to market as fast as possible. I don't think they worry about the red tape at this stage.
But they will, if they want to keep existing. I mean, at one point, if they just rush to the market and they don't have a product that is compliant or ready to, I don't know.
It depends on the use cases.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have time for the last.
I wanted to make a comment about what Javier spoke of earlier about European companies or startups eventually having to move to the US because of funding and stuff. But I don't think we can outspend China and the US. I think if you fund companies with EU budgets, you have to focus on open standards and open source, because then it doesn't matter if the company is bought out by the US, the technology stays open for use by other companies and stuff.
It's a very logical reasoning, of course. There's no way of outspending right now those capital areas and those developments. We don't need it in any case. But with the current setting, with the current setup, the gap, the wide between the different options for financing is so big that there is no question that you need to go elsewhere. No? In my opinion, we need to at least narrow the gap and have the access available in quality environments and quality areas. It's not always a matter of burning money to have good and smart developments in technology. It's about having the precise access to capital in the precise moment when they need it, these companies. And in that, I think we have it in Europe. We have the potential to have that at least.
Thank you.